All right, so I am back with my friend David Hu for a part two of the interview that we did. David, how are you doing today?
Really happy, excited to talk with you again, Matthew, and see
Great,
where
great.
we're gonna meander to this time around.
Sounds good. Yeah, so last time we kind of ended the podcast kind of talking about your ayahuasca experiences in Brazil mainly. You're traveling in the rainforest and whatnot. But at the beginning of that podcast, we kind of started talking about your California travel adventures and everything. But we kind of left out a lot in between because we just sort of, that was just the nature of how we jumped around in that. So I am very curious to learn about, other travel experiences that you've had. You talked a lot about interesting things that you did in California, but I'm really curious to hear, where you went after that. What were some of your experiences like?
Yeah, so I'll just share some places and things that come to mind. Um, uh, so I actually started traveling by going to China and teaching some kids and adults about what we call meta skills. So they're sort of life skills. They're things like empathy, or talking to strangers, overcoming fears. Um, Rejection therapy was one of those things we taught. I remember we were practicing rejection therapy with a taxi driver, and we asked the taxi driver, who we found out was Tibetan, if we could uh, like have dinner at her home, and she was just like, no. And then we were like, okay, well, we gave no context on that. That sounds creepy. Can I, you
Yeah.
know? Okay, so let's put this another way. So we're camp counselors. We have a group of kids who are, learning, here for summer camp, and we really want to like have like a cultural exchange and get to know the Tibetan way of life. We'll pay for this. Is this something you can do? And then she's like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I actually have a friend who could do something like that. So we just turned it around completely. Um, but just things like that, teaching these kids, they made a documentary. Like the first week we would teach these skills, and the second week we would have they would make their own documentary by talking to strangers. Oh man, um, I'm just sort of scratching the tip of the iceberg here with this, but um, there's just so many other experiences too. My friend and I, he was an anthropologist or studying to be an anthropologist, and we would go to these tiny little villages, the homes of these ethnic minorities in China, and we would just knock on their homes, knock on their doors, and then ask to visit their homes. And my friend would like they would ask them like 100 or more questions about what they eat, what they believe in, what their family structures are like, their traditions and customs. And then sometimes they'd be so gracious and kind to invite us over to eat with them or to sleep at their place. But just the experiences that I had in China was a completely different China than the one I grew up in.
Mm.
It was big city Beijing, where nobody knows you. You're anonymous. It's like any other big city, um, and you know. But here in the rural in the ethnic with the ethnic minorities, it was some of the kindest people I met, where I could just like smile at them. They would look at me in the eye. They would smile back, um, and have a genuine connection. Um, so, those were two experiences that were really uh, profound for me and really opened me up as the first part of my travel. And from there, I went to a whole bunch of other places: Japan, Vietnam, Bali, Costa Rica, and then, of course, I met you in Hawaii. It's so unexpected because I was planning to travel for 3 months and then go back to California. But as I traveled, I found that as I was on the other side of the globe from home, I felt more of a sense of home that far away than I did living in California.
Why do you think that is?
It's a great question. Huh. There's a bunch of different potential reasons, and I'll try to guess at it. I don't know exactly why. But one thing is, well, I'm Asian, and I was born in China, and I lived in China till I was 7. And there in China, there is a different way of thinking and being with people. It's a collectivist culture. So the way that people are, their attention, it's on the context versus the protagonist, if you will. It's on the group. It's on others. It's on taking care of. It's like, do you have your needs met? What do you need? And less about the self, the individual.
Yeah.
And in uh, the West, it's of course about the individual. What do I need? What do I want? How can I get what I need and want? And not to say that one is better than the other, because I know all of the sacrifices and all the disadvantages of being in a collectivist culture too, especially as especially like one in China where it's very collectivist. Um, but there was something that my body feels different. Like even as soon as I step onto the airplane and with the Chinese air stewardesses, the way that they would attend to me, I felt like I was treated like family. They weren't necessarily so in the West, in San Francisco, in Canada, in New York. There's a politeness. People are very polite. They're civil, but I don't feel a sense of closeness necessarily. Where in the East, and especially in more developing places like in Vietnam, in the rural places, people don't necessarily know about how to be civil, but I feel an immediate sense of family. It's like they just treat you like a friend. They treat you like a family. And yeah, I remember like in Bali, the taxi driver dropped me off at the wrong place, and I thought it was my homestay, and I just sort of barged in with my bags, but it turned out to be an ashram. I didn't know it, but then they were like, they gave me tea, they gave me fruit, they were talking to me, they were like, oh, do you realize you have to sleep outside here? It's like, oh, fine, this is the place I booked, right? Until later I found out it wasn't, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me pay for the food, and they're like, no, it's okay, come back tomorrow, teach us yoga, and I came back tomorrow, taught them yoga, and they're like, "Oh, come and join our, celebration for the dead in a few days." And I came and I did that, and they fed me all this food. I met their family, and then their family members invited me to their dinners, and just
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's like. And I remember going after coming back from travel, being in Palo Alto, there were people on the street, but I felt so lonely. Everybody
Yeah.
was like, going somewhere, and it was such a different feeling.
Yeah, it's interesting though because I also feel more at home when I'm traveling. Like I can really relate to that. But I haven't been to Asia. I've only really traveled Hawaii and then South America. And I
Mm.
wouldn't say that South America is like a crazy super collectivist culture as much as Asia is. But I think that just that sense of traveling and that adventure, it weirdly does feel very at home for me also. So yeah, maybe it's not related to the culture necessarily.
There's a both and for sure. Well, first of all, in
Yeah.
South America, people are way more open. Like you're in Brazil, and I'm here in Brazil. People are very
Yeah, yeah.
so that's definitely a factor. But also, for me personally, when I travel, I'm a different person because when I'm in one place, I have my routines, I have my friends, I have it, and it feels like I'm sort of in this matrix of like here's how to be, here's who I am, here's who my friends see me as, that like keeps me in that mode. Like it's hard for me to change because my friends expect me to be a certain way, and I um, reciprocate in some way, reflect that reflection. But when I travel, and when I was traveling, I would be in one place for like sometimes as short as like 3 days, 2 or 3 days, and I'm in a different place. Every time I pick up my bags and go somewhere new, I feel like a blank slate. I feel like I just erased everything. Like it's,
Mm.
nobody knows me. Like I am thousands, hundreds of miles away, and I get to experiment and try to be a new person. And because I don't know anybody, it forces me to have to be more social and extroverted.
Hmm.
And also because I don't know anybody, there's no costs. Like if I make a stupid mistake, if I like there's no reputation to protect.
Yeah.
So like, I take chances that I normally wouldn't. I talk to strangers. I make a fool of myself. I do things that are against the customs because I have to. There's no like I don't know what the customs are. So
Uh-huh.
it frees me up actually in a way.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm gonna be a sort of a bit of a rude tourist here, but I'm sorry, I'm a tourist. I don't know how to exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so.
Yeah. How do you see though? I mean, like you said, it's a blank slate, which has its benefits, but it also has negatives because a lot of the friends that you meet while traveling, you never see again. The people that you meet, you never see again. So how do you kind of view all that?
Oh man, I'm just, I see as soon as you said that, I feel it in my heart. One of my friends here just left. I'm traveling, and it's just like, oh my gosh, we connected so well. Felt like we were family,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's that continuous like, it almost feels like you gotta just sort of surrender to the ephemeral nature of coming and going, and it's like as yes, people do leave, and you leave, and there might be some heartbreak about that, but then as soon as you do, it's replaced by something else. Someone else comes in. You meet other people. Um,
Yeah.
so it's in that sense that's what fills the gaps, the holes, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also feel that I've met the most interesting people that I've ever met while traveling, like
Mm.
I have great friends back home, but there's something about the people that you meet while traveling that they always just have such crazy stories. They're always very interesting, involved in all sorts of different things. You get to mix in with people from tons of different backgrounds instead of just, like your regular friends back home that are all kind of doing similar things. They're cool people, but they're all very similar versus the diverse people that you meet while traveling. It's addictive for me. It's
Oh my
addictive.
God, that's what absolutely. It's like I don't even you're in a bubble, but you don't. You like in the Bay Area, it was a given that like you would make at least six figures, and like that there's like 200K would be the minimum, and you would be to live on, which is it's crazy anywhere else. Um, but it just becomes such a norm that I, I ha- I have to travel to see
Hmm.
how much of a bubble I was in, and it it is really refreshing in that way. It really I feel like travel is an education of sorts because we can really get identified with the people around us, with their way of thinking, with like okay, this is with their values, and it's only when we travel that we see those values, the tribal identity that we've identified ourselves as, and realize that we can choose um, to be that or to be something else. And like you said, we meet so many interesting people. You meet people with completely different lifestyles, and it just opens up all possibilities for you as a traveler.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you said that travel is an education.
Mm.
Like I never went to college. I've traveled during the years that I would have gone to college, and I'm grateful that I
Yeah.
decided to do it this way because I've learned way more traveling than like it's just such a life education. What else do you think? Yeah, what else do you think are some of the biggest? either like lessons that you've learned while traveling or expansions of your mind that you've experienced. What would you say are the biggest things that you've learned from traveling?
That's a great question, and the first thing that comes to mind is actually empowerment. So, what I mean by that is I feel a sense of agency. I feel that I can take care of myself and I can choose the life I want to live and what I want to do. Because when I'm traveling, I have to take care of everything on my own. I have to um, figure out where to go. I have to figure out where to get cash, how to speak the language, where to buy things. Like I have to survive,
Yeah.
and there's just so many things that your attention is focused on, and you just have to do it. It's survival.
Uh-huh.
But that sense like of like doing everything on your own, and then being able to do that gives me a sense of feeling like I can do anything else that I want to do in my life. Um, and I often find that I'm most productive on at train stations, on airports, while waiting for the bus, things like this, because
Mm.
I'm actually in the mode of like I have to make the plane, I have to make the train, I have to, and then I'm like there's all the usual excuses when I'm in a more sedentary place of like the usual fears or procrastination. None of that is there. It just goes away, and I feel very bold and very alive. So that's
Hmm.
one of the biggest benefits. Because I remember in California, before traveling, I was living in a beautiful, amazing place with the top of the line, everything, and I was feeling dead. I didn't want to do anything. I was procrastinating. I had no motivation. Um, so that's for me is one of the biggest benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course there's all the ones we talked about too, like the cultural education, right? Seeing, like especially I want to reemphasize this point of like a fish doesn't know that it's in water until it's taken out of the water,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
you don't see your culture until you're in a different culture. That all of these things that you take are given are just made up. Um,
Yeah. Do
and
you have any like big examples of those types of things?
oh, that's a good question. Let me see. Hmm. Well, um, yeah. Well, okay. So, yeah. Again, it comes down to some of the social code of conduct, the social rules, the implicit, especially in um, liberal, like very intellectual places in California. There's a lot of these uh, implicit rules that people abide by, that in other places just are not there completely. Like for example, in China, when people line up, they'll push you, they'll
Mm.
squeeze, they'll push you to get on the bus, and they don't give a crap at all. And I look Chinese, so they don't give a shit at all about me, and they'll just joggle me around. They're rude. You can't do like people will not try to be nice to you. They'll say what's on their mind. Um, and actually, initially I was really fucking pissed off. Like, don't fucking touch me. These are my boundaries. Don't you get it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna call
Yeah.
the fucking cops on you, but actually you
Yeah.
can't. There's no cops to call, and this is how they are. It's like at some point, it's like an annoying thing. You get used to it, and then you realize that all the things that I do to try to be polite and nice and whatever, I don't have to do that either. Um,
Hmm.
I can be real with people. That's I think one of the biggest things is um, in very civilized society, there's like a lot of rules, and if you were to break, people might not tell you, but they will judge you, and um, you'll feel that, and you'll be, you won't be included in certain things that in other places. But like it creates for me a sense of, um, it's like I don't really feel connected because I can't really tell whether if you aren't really real with you. But in other places, people like you, they tell you that. People don't like you, they won't try to pretend. And something about that, I actually feel a greater sense of ease and connection.
Yeah, it's interesting because like in certain parts of the world, like the way that I am, like I've been told in Japan, people would hate me because I'm loud and kind of and so I've been told by some Asian friends that the Japanese would probably have a tough time with me. But I had the exact opposite experience in Brazil, where you are right now. I mean, they treated me like a celebrity in certain parts of in certain parts of Brazil because I'm a gringo and they don't ever see gringos, and so I mean it just depends on where you are in the world. Like the same person can either be like loved or hated. You know, not necessarily hated, but
They will never
bothersome.
tell you that in Japan. They will like treat you with a lot of respect, but they won't necessarily be in your face about about it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely. It can, the way you are, it can be very different depending on the context. And that's something also, as an Asian man, when I was in Asia, there was a strange sense of not being treated differently that I didn't realize I was feeling
Mm,
on a very, very tiny subconscious way
mm.
in the West. There's always a sense of I belong, but I'm slightly different, and I need to be a certain way to belong. That when I was in Asia, it's just like people won't even look at me a second. Like they won't give me a second
Yeah.
because I look like that they do. So I didn't even realize that that was a thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that the ratio thing is actually, but honestly, like people are too polite in the West to tell you, but the first thing they see when they see me is an Asian man. Um,
Yeah, I
if
mean
they
fair
want
enough. Yeah.
political correctness, they're not gonna tell me that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fair enough. Are you able to describe or put into words like maybe some of the subtle ways you're treated differently in America, being like quote unquote different?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's gonna be very difficult to think of particular examples. But I
Yeah.
feel it for sure. Like because my family comes from like I was born in China and I grew up in Canada. My family, my parents, they're Chinese and they don't really have much of a Western cultural upbringing. So like the values are completely different. So when I go home, it's all about like, being deferential to my elders and so forth, and being quiet and listening. Whereas in the the Western culture, it's a lot more about like asserting yourself and being loud and taking up space and dominating. And that's like very odd for an Asian man to do. It's just not accepted in the Asian culture. Like when I'm in the East, and I'm like, if I do that, people are like, "You're so selfish," and
Yeah.
you know. But then if I'm in the West and I don't do that, then I'm gonna get stepped on or something, and like I'm not gonna get my needs met in a way. So I need it. So it's this conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but it's also very interesting because then I feel like I'm in a unique position where I can see that, right? Like people in the East who grow up in the East, they don't necessarily see that or know that that's like a way of being that can change. And also same in America. If you only grew up in America, you never were anywhere else, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't feel a difference. But for me, as like biracial, I can sort of see that and feel that, and I can sort of switch between different modes, um, which it's yeah, it's both a blessing and a curse in some way.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's a very unique experience. I'd
Mhm.
love to go to Asia and see if I'm able to. Like my Asian friends tell me I should go to Asia and see how well I can actually assimilate and see if I can actually become quiet.
Oh my gosh. So, Matthew, that would be the biggest experiment ever. I'm laughing because Matthew is really well known for his beautifully resonant voice. That is
Yeah.
actually quite a pleasure to listen to when, except if you're trying to like meditate or something.
Yeah.
But I think, first of all, I think people would love you because you are just so unapologetically you, unfiltered. Like people in the
Yeah.
East, Asia, there's like masks. There's like it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's like
Uh-huh.
they're like doing a thing and they're like they want to be like there's like um they're not always that honest or upfront with you. But you
Hmm.
are just direct and and there's a refreshing quality to that.
Yeah, I've had other Asian people tell me something similar, like
Yeah.
that they said that they respected that in me, and it was interesting
Yeah.
because I do see that sometimes. Like Asia, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're very much about like fashion and like their status. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
America's like that too, but my impression of Asia is that it's another level.
Oh my God, it drives me nuts. It's like
Yeah.
so in your face. People are constantly comparing and talking about status symbols and how much money or apartments they own or cars, and it makes my heart break
Mm.
that there isn't a greater consciousness of like spiritual values of of deep heartfelt connection, of connection to nature, to a higher power, to even to themselves, to who they are underneath all of that. In
Uh-huh.
China especially, because the Cultural Revolution, it was the values were completely different, but then in an effort to catch up to the West and be developed and be prosperous, the leaders at the time decided to abandon all of the Eastern values as saying, all of these values are bad. This is what keeps us poor. So we're going to adopt all of the capitalistic values. And China decided to take, honestly, the worst of it. And it is soul sucking to be
Mm.
in some of the cities there.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. I mean, especially like with both of us having as many, plant medicine experiences as we've had, it almost feels like that culture is the opposite of a sort of
Oh
plant
my
medicine
God.
based.
I mean, I just yesterday I had my birthday and I was dedicating it to the preservation of the indigenous tribes of the Amazon and elsewhere. But that is where I have felt the greatest sense of connection to that fire, to that realness, to the love, to the
Hmm.
humanity, to
Yeah,
who we innately are, to
yeah,
getting away all the layers of pretension, of masks, of coach of fakeness, to
uh-huh.
really feel and see each other, and how it makes me cry
Mm.
in utter love and joy. And
Yeah,
that is something that I really, really, really wish that the people in the East who are so starved of this, and in the West, in modern society, of
yeah,
into connection can have. And when I say the East, I might be saying, like I'm sort of saying like, oh, I feel so connected, like people are so much so real in the East, but I also say people are so fake, and I want to clarify that it really depends on where you go. Like in China, I can feel both polar opposites if I'm in the
yeah.
cities or
That
if
makes
I'm in
sense.
the rural areas. And if I'm in, yeah, Vietnam, if I'm in some of the really small villages, I'll feel that too. So and it's also like that in Hawaii where we were in some of the uh, these eco villages. So it's not so much of like a east west thing and more of like a city, like rural or developed, how developed the place is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, we've been talking a lot about the lessons and things that you've learned while traveling. Um, another sort of lesson opportunity for you in life has been related to FTX.
Oh,
And
we're jumping to a completely different topic.
yes, I know. I'm trying to figure out how, because I want to talk to you about FTX and all that,
Let's talk about
and
it. Let's go there.
I'm trying to figure
I
out how
love
to
how
segue.
direct you are, Matthew. You just like say FTX. You're not writing anything else. You
Yeah,
say FTX.
yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, I mean it is along the same line of like different things that you've learned, and so to give some context for the viewers, David, who started a cryptocurrency hedge fund back a couple years ago, and he raised a lot of money in that. I don't know if he wants to talk about how much or any numbers or specifics. I'll let him do that if he wants. And I invested some money into that. It was doing very well in that hedge fund with some algorithm trading and various other things that you can talk about too. But then it was all stored in FTX, and kind of the rest is history. So, David, I really am curious about like learning kind of what was your experience like with that. It's a really interesting story for me.
Yeah, so let me
Uh,
give some more context on that too. So, yes, I've been running a cryptocurrency hedge fund that was trading using algorithms, and we were running on this platform called this exchange called FTX, which probably most people have heard of, um, which was an exchange that uh, failed, that collapsed, and was found out to be a fraud. They were using customer funds that they weren't supposed to be using in high risk investments. Um, and then when people tried to withdraw money, they didn't have enough uh, to give people their money. They didn't have any money left. So it was quite a shock when that happened. As our operations were running on FTX, it was one of the premier exchanges, believe it or not, for algorithmic trading and for in general. It had such good reputation. It was one of the most regulatory compliant, and seemed very legit. Seemed was backed by lots of famous people and well-known investors. So it was quite a surprise to many people when this happened, including us. And we had millions on it. Um, that um, This happened in November, and this precipitated one of the more challenging or interesting times in my life. Definitely one of the most challenging. Of telling my friends and talking, many of our investors were our friends, what happened, and many of them were angry at us, especially those who've invested a lot, especially because also people tend to get very emotional around money. Its money is tied to, a lot of people. It's their net worth is tied to their self worth, and issues of scarcity. It lives in a lot of us. And so when we told people this, it was quite shocking to a lot of people, and it hurt a lot of friendships, um, and it uh, was the last thing that I wanted. What I wanted was to make my friends money. I want to make them wealthy, and I want to also have the resources to direct into the projects that I feel are going to be the best for the world and that I want to see. Um, and so this was the exact opposite, the negative of all of that, and not just with one person, but over and over and over, and on such an order of such a scale, right? Sometimes some people trusted me with their quite a significant amount of their net worth. Um,
are you able to say like what's like some numbers for like I'm not going to say how much I had, but you can
yeah, but
say what some people had in there.
I mean, yeah,
Was
I
it
mean,
hundreds of thousands for some people?
yeah. It's like 6 to 7 figures, right? So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah. First, and it depends on the person. For some people, losing 7 figures is actually a drop in the bucket. They have a lot to invest. They're professional investors, and some other people losing 6 figures or even 5 figures is most of their life savings, and that can be a much bigger shock, especially if their lifestyle is such that they aren't working much and they're, um, you know, so it's yeah, it's definitely challenging to tell people, but having gone through it, I can say that I am a stronger person for it. I used to go twist myself into contortions to avoid telling people bad news, but like it's almost like the universe is like, well, you're gonna do it, and over and over and over.
Hmm.
Um, and to face like because it's easy for me personally to have a good relationship with someone when everything's good. Of course, everyone, it's easier for everyone when it's like that, and I want people to think well of me, especially with my upbringing. Um, I want to please people. I don't want to. So this was like just a lot of cold water poured on me. Um, but enough
Yeah.
about me too. It was also impacting a lot of my friends' lives, and so. But the the thing that I found is that quite a lot of people also have come to understand, and as a result, not put it personally on me. Um, and we are doing everything we can to take responsibility for what we can take responsibility for, and to learn and grow from this. And that's the other thing about this experience. It has been one of the most growthful experiences of my life. Um, to first see it, really, and it's all about responsibility. To see where am I taking actually more responsibility than I need to. Where am I bashing myself on the head for things that isn't necessarily my fault? Um, and it's a habit I picked up to sort of hurt myself, um, that I don't need to do. And on the other hand, where are those areas that I can genuinely take responsibility for and learn from and grow in? And it's been informative in both of these areas.
Hmm. What were some of the most strong reactions that people had? I mean,
Oh,
were they like really mad at you, calling you names? Like, what was it like?
oh, for sure, yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, some people they show their raw anger, or disgust, or um, they might project, they might blame, but honestly, I feel like for the most part, people like were understanding. Um, but yeah, uh, because we were pretty upfront with people, like, hey, we got some. Oh wow, there's a whole party going on here at the river. It's just some fishing
I
boats.
love Brazil.
Yeah, it's just like a party can pop up anywhere, anytime. It's not really even yeah.
Brazil is so great. It's
It
so
is.
great. We
It
can
is.
cut this part out if we want. And like, do
Yeah,
you
we
think the
can
party's
totally.
passing
Yeah.
or?
Um. Oh my God, this boat is underwater. Holy crap! Wow.
So
Oh
are
my.
you like right by the ocean?
I'm by the river, and yeah, there's a
Okay.
whole cuckoo going on there. Okay, anyway, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm
I think we
yeah.
should leave that part in, actually,
Okay, let's
just to
leave it
show,
in. Let's leave it
just to share some of the Brazilian culture to the world.
in. Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's been a trial by fire, but I feel like it has also been like you said, you didn't go to college, but you learn more by traveling. You learn more about life,
Yes.
and it's similar here. I feel like this is the real education,
Yes.
is to really feel the pain and then to understand as a result. Okay, here are all the things that we didn't know that we didn't know. It's like you think you know what the risks are, and you think you know what you don't know about what the risks are, but then there's a completely new category of like, wow, I never expected that FTX would be a fraud. So it
Hmm.
teaches you humility,
Yeah.
and it's like teaches you that as certain as you are about something, in fact, the more certain you are about something, or the more um, that can be a clue as to maybe you are attached to a certain mindset or worldview or belief because you're afraid of it not, or like of it not being the case, or actually, the more the more confident you are about something, the more you should be able to consider the opposite of it, right?
Mm.
Only when you are completely comfortable considering all of the reasons why that should not be the case, and you've thought it all through, can you then actually be confident about your conclusion so that you can know in which cases that your thesis, your hypothesis is invalid. Um, that's humility. That's true humility, and that's something that, and the other thing I'm learning too is I can never say that I'm humble enough. Every time if
Mm.
you think you're humble enough, then that means that you think that there's always more humility you can have. Um,
Yeah.
so that's been a big lesson, and then just it has not only has it changed the way I think about business and portfolio management and running hedge fund, but also how I am as a person.
Hmm.
Any little slips in terms of if I'm not completely upfront with somebody, if I'm misleading them in any way, that can come back to me in ways that I don't like. And so it's
Hmm.
really taught me how to or like why or the importance of really honoring um, the integrity and transparency,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and like why I want to do that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's some other ones, some other lessons too, but it's honestly, it has been a an education of sorts with a very high tuition and a very high emotional um, charge and labor, but also one of the best educations I've ever gotten.
Yeah, so would you say that you're weirdly grateful for the
Oh, fuck
experience?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Definitely.
I'm grateful to have lost money in that because I
Oh,
learned things from it as well, you know?
oh,
So I mean, I think like even the people that lost money, any experience in life I think
yeah.
can be you can use it to your benefit.
Yes, you're right. That's exactly the way to look at it. That's exactly the way to look at it. And when we look at it in that way, then it makes it true. Then we get derive the benefit from it. And in fact, it's our if everything goes according to plan, you don't learn anything. But it's through the losses, the failures, the mistakes, the pain, um, that we really grow and learn. And absolutely, I've learned, yeah, so much from this. And I'm yeah, like you said, yeah, weirdly grateful for this experience. It's taught me a lot more patience,
Yeah.
compassion, um, and it has also strangely helped me become more me.
Hmm.
Helped me become more comfortable
Hmm.
just being myself.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And so you just had your birthday yesterday, you said,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you've experienced a lot for right?
32. Yeah.
32? Yeah, 32 years old. I mean, you've experienced a lot. But I'm curious, what is next for you? Are you
Oh,
still going to be running the hedge fund? What are
yes.
your 30s have in store for you?
That's a great question, Matthew. I love it, and it's the thing is that I like what it has in store for me. I have no clue about. If you told my 22 year old self what I would be doing today, I would be completely flabbergasted. I'd be like, "That is not David. That what the." I've become almost like a diametrically opposite person from my 22-year-old self, and then another diametrically opposite person again from that change,
Mm,
and just So first of all, I don't know, but that's what I'm excited about. Is I have no idea. Um, as to the hedge fund, yes, we are absolutely continuing with that on a much stronger footing, and we are so excited about that. We have some newer algorithms that we've developed that are working amazingly well.
Mm,
Triple digit returns yearly with very few negative months. Um, and uh, we're on some very solid self custody infrastructure, uh, security audits. It just feels a lot more solid than we ever had before.
mm,
And we feel like we're preparing the launch pad for um, a rocket ship here.
mm,
And in a way that is sustainable. That isn't. It's not like we're putting in like 80 hours a week trying to like, we're doing it at a pace that we know we can sustain. That's respectful to ourselves, that to our bodies. That's the other thing that I've learned is when I was young, like 10 years ago, I would be staying up all night working on projects and getting it out the door. But then, and it would feel great well, it'd be really tiring, but it would feel like, right. But then I would need to like catch up on sleep and recover and stuff, and it wouldn't be sustainable because it would like in the rush of getting it out, there's always stuff that breaks, and you have it's so. Um, and then I just spent a lot of time learning how to treat myself well, how to have. I was meditating like 3 hours a day. Had
wow.
almost a complete opposite life, right? Where my entire schedule was wellness, like exercise, meditate, do journal, see therapy, do go be in nature, eat well, cook, and um, but I've learned to balance that, right? Learn to not necessarily meditate 6 hours a day, nor to work till 5 a.m. every day in a row for a week, but to listen to my body and know, okay, right now, here I can do a sprint, or like, okay, here I can recover, and really like have both the 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 work and really be creative, but also have the rest and the recharge time. So I feel really good about that, and that the hedge fund, and actually, what comes to my mind now is creativity. Um, I see whatever happens in my 30s. I don't know what it's going to be, what the form is going to be, but whatever it is, it's going to be creative in the sense of it's going to be expressing my soul. It's going to be expressing who I am innately in whatever form that looks like, whether that's the hedge fund, whether that is actually movement. I love to move my body. In fact, this is such a strange story, but I met both of my business partners that were working on with the hedge fund, my primary partner and also our quant researchers, while I was topless dancing on the beach in Hawaii. You would not connect that with like managers, but that's how I met.
Yeah. No, I think that that's how some of the best connections really are made. I mean, that's definitely how I've made my best connections in life, just kind of in those random encounters like that, not necessarily at a business conference or something. You know what I mean? Not at the business conferences. It's really more organic where you meet
It's a
just the
lot more
best thing.
organic. It's
Yeah.
it can't be more organic than dancing like to the flow, no music, just like feeling it out, half naked and like with the sun, with the
Yeah.
ocean. So that's what I see in my 30s is more authenticity, right? In my 20s, it might be more about how do I play the social game? How do I fit in? How do I um, like be successful? How do I become spiritual? How do I become social? And now it's like, okay, well, how do I become me? Who is me? And what I don't know what that's gonna look like, but I know that's going to be ultimately the most fruitful thing I can do for myself and for the world.
Awesome. Well, one last question. Yeah, what would you tell your younger self? If I could be your younger self, what would you tell me?
Um, let me see. uh, if I were giving myself advice,
Yeah.
oh, the first thing that comes to mind is don't take it so seriously.
Mm.
Because I remember how like distraught I would get at like some social situation where I'm like, oh, do I look good enough? And what would this person think about me? What, oh, they didn't respond, or oh, that person didn't. And then I'd be like, ah, you know. Um, and now looking back at it, it's like, wow, so many situations, so many people. It was all beautiful, fun, ridiculous, funny learning experiences. Anyway, so
Yeah. Awesome. I love it.
that yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, it's been really great, David, with you on the podcast. Now that we're pretty much wrapping up here, is there anything else that you want to put out there into the world? Now is your time. The world is watching.
World, world, know this, hear this, be this, listen to me pontificate about what I want. Give a speech to the world. Wow, great question. Great. Um. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just sharing this, uh, for uh, my birthday post where I shared about this deep, 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 deep experience that I had in the Amazon rainforest in the jungle. How deeply I felt, how much I felt loved. And this was coming into this. I was in one of the most challenging situations in my life where I'm not going to go into the details, but I felt like I don't even know how I'm going to get out of this. But as soon as I stepped into the jungle, there was this instant, like, whoa, I belong. And like, whoa, all of these problems are problems in my head. Right now, I have food, I have shelter, there's the sun, I am one with, I'm fine, I'm alive. Instantly, I felt so alive. Um, and I feel this night and day difference. I remember, like, you know, 8 years ago, me going back to my apartment, um, my one bedroom apartment, feeling so small, stifled, trapped, so lonely. I was going back to the apartment, there was my cat, but I felt so miserable. And I had no idea how to get out of that. I didn't know what was missing. Um, I had the best job at the most prestigious company, and remember walking out onto the street, and I was an atheist at that time. I was praying to God. I was like, God, if you exist, help me, get me out of this
Mm.
suffering, get me out of this pain. And then through everything that's happened in the last 8 years, I've experienced the wildest of highs, the wildest of lows, the lefts, the rights, the everything, the ups and the downs, the most ridiculous, the weirdest, the most beautiful. Oh my God. And there's nothing like there's nothing like life when you really feel it, when you really know it. And that's what I experienced in the jungle with the Amazon, with the indigenous. That's what I experienced when I'm traveling. That's what I experienced when I visited the prisons in California, with these big guys who've been in solitary confinement, breaking down, crying, hugging each other. Um, that's what I experienced visiting the ethnic minorities, or teaching kids and adults in China about authentic relating. That's what I experienced when I got lost in Bali. That's what I experienced dancing half naked on the beach. That's what I experienced deliberately getting myself rejected for 100 days in a row. Uh, and that's also even what I experienced just yesterday, hanging out with my friends. Um, so, I'm trying to figure out what my message is here, but
Get your
is,
message is to get out and live.
is
Like
that life is
that's
possible.
yeah.
And it's that there is such a depth of feeling of connection, of aliveness, that is the difference, that feels like the difference between being in a prison cell versus being completely free like a kid running around roaming free. um, laughing joyously, crying sumptuously. And that's an experience that I wish for every being to have, especially
Yeah.
those who might be caught up in the sort of places that I was caught up in. Um, so yeah, and that with that experience of connection, of deep, heartfelt knowing of who we are, of our own souls, and of our connection to each other, what is possible from that? I really don't know, but I believe that that is the starting point of so much change that needs to happen for our world to not just survive the biggest crisis we've ever experienced in the history of humanity, in the history of this planet itself, but to thrive, to really not just. It feels like we're in the stage where we're a caterpillar, um, and we're liquefying, but we're about to become a butterfly, but we're going through some growth pains. But to really get to the next stage, we have to flap those wings. We have to get out of the cocoon. We have to push against this resistance. And so there's a lot of crisis right now. But if we're really able to expand and flap those wings, we're going to become a completely different society, unimaginable right now to the people of this time. And I don't even know. I wouldn't even be able to describe it with words, but it's going to be beautiful beyond our wildest imaginations. It can be, and it's up to each and
Yeah, it can
every
be.
one of us to actualize that future. We have that choice. We always have that
Mhm.
choice, and it starts with us. It starts with how we relate to ourselves, what decisions we make, how we choose, what we choose, um, and where we choose to orient our lives towards possibility or towards something else.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. It's crazy because like that whole, I don't know what you could call that monologue or whatever you just gave.
Right.
I love it because it sounds like it's exactly like something that I would say. And then at the end of it, my friends would be like, "Oh yeah, okay, Plato, whatever." You know what I mean? Like, like I would say the exact same type of stuff. So that's exactly why I have you on the podcast because it's always great conversations like that. You're a great
No,
guy. I mean, I could go on for
I'm very
hours and
happy.
hours with you, but two
We're
hours,
brothers in this way. We're brothers in
yeah,
this
yeah,
way, and if I talk like this also with my friends, they'll be like, "Okay, all right, well, I'm gonna go back and watch my TV, and you go and change the world, David. Okay, that's great."
yeah. I love
Yeah,
it.
but that's why we need each other, um, to people who believe this, and you'll find that there is, as you unapologetically embrace who you are, you will attract and find other people who also unapologetically embrace who they are. And when enough of us come together, we are unstoppable. And in fact, we give permission for everyone else to unapologetically embrace who they are because it
Yes,
is who they
I
are.
love that.
They want that. They want to do that, but they're all afraid of others making fun of them for their wildly impossible dreams. So that's
Yeah,
what I encourage each and one of us to do is to dream those wildly impossible dreams because we all
I
have
love
them.
it. I love it. Yeah. All right, David. Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. It's been great. Actually, that's exactly an hour there too. So that we're at exactly 2 hours.
Perfect.
Weird how that works, but yeah, I will stop recording here. Um,